My name is George Galloway, presenter of كلمة on Mayadeen television. Morning to you. I don't mince my words. I speak كلمة and my audience does too. كلمة free word, free for me, free for you. Catch it. Nice to meet you, brother. Welcome to كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, but discussing Pakistan, and in particular the removal from office of the popular Prime Minister Imran Khan, and the great bounce back that he might now be engaged upon. For the avoidance of doubt, I'm not an Imran Khan man. I spent more than 30 years literally at the side of the late Benazir Bhutto, the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the daughter of the great Pakistani leader and martyr Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. So I'm not your natural Imran Khan supporter. But I know an American-inspired regime change operation when I see one. I have, after all, seen a very large number of those. And the question we are posing this evening is, was Imran Khan removed as part of the normal internal political operations inside any country, or was he removed from abroad? And is, as he alleges, his usurpers merely a front, an imported government, imported by the United States of America, in retaliation, you may say, for his failure to support Western countries in their ostracism of Russia over Ukraine, and his traditional allegiance to Pakistan's relationship with China. Perhaps it's acceptable to the West for Pakistan to be an ally of China, but to be an ally of China and Russia at the same time may have been a step too far. Imran Khan was rudely removed from office just like that. They convened the court, which is normally a sleepy affair, hardly at its work before noon each day, at midnight to consolidate his overthrow. But since then, Imran Khan has embarked upon a nationwide series of rallies which are simply stunning in their scale. I'm talking crowds of millions of people, even in places that are not particularly his heartland. In Karachi, in Lahore, in all kinds of places some of you will never have heard of. He's packing hundreds of thousands, even millions of people onto the squares in what are called jalsas, great rallies that must be making the imported government's blood run cold. That's not to say there are not legitimate criticisms of Imran Khan. I have many of those myself. But maybe people are responding to his call because they're tired of Pakistan being used by the United States of America for its own geopolitical purposes, even when those purposes are quite obviously against the interests of Pakistan. It's against the interests of Pakistan for China's Belt and Road Initiative, for example, to be sabotaged. It's in the interests of Pakistan to have a close relationship with a booming Chinese economy. It's obviously against Pakistan's interest not to accept oil and gas and wheat from Russia at discount prices, because Pakistan's 220 million population needs these things. It was not in Pakistan's interest to be the base camp for the Afghan war from the 1980s until now. It flooded Pakistan with millions of refugees that nobody else pays for, as well as drugs and guns and crime of all kinds. And yet, that's what Pakistan was used for. Many Pakistanis, most I think, regard Pakistan as having been used and abused by United States power. And the removal of Imran Khan may, for them, have been the last straw. Imran Khan's great march throughout the country will culminate in a march on Islamabad itself. And as his demands are modest, free elections now, it's very hard to see how you muster an argument against that. After all, the Prime Minister has been removed. Let's have an election to pick a new one. That seems to me a demand whose time has come. But I'm just the enthusiastic amateur. I'm joined by my usual panel of distinguished experts, and there are no more distinguished, no more expert than the first and best Mayor of London, my old parliamentary colleague, Ken Livingstone. Ken, welcome back. How does it look to you? Regime change or internal politics?
I think it's regime change. If you look back in the 77 years since the end of the Second World War, America has intervened to overthrow governments all over the world, to impose ones that do what it wants, to extract their resources. I mean, literally, it's gone on all my life. So it doesn't surprise me. If you think back, when that was our colony, why didn't we create a proper modern democracy? When it was our colony, we were exploiting all the resources we could get out of it as well. Literally, the whole of the third world has been exploited by Britain, America, France, and one has to say, increasingly, Russia's not much fun either.
What about you, Shahid? You are head of the International Human Rights Council. You're director here in the UK, but you're also an investigative journalist of note. You've broken many important stories. Once upon a time, you were my employer on a radio station not too far from here. It's good to see you again. How does the situation in Pakistan look to you?
Just as my Honourable Ken Livingstone has said, it's not a new thing. From the ambulance of the founder of Pakistan, Jinnah, he was alone, sick and dying, and there was no help. There was conspiracy. Another dictator, Iskandar Mirza, he was sent out on gunpoint. Another Sohrawardi was sent out by force to Lebanon, and he was asked not to come back, we'll break your legs. Liaquat Ali Khan, Prime Minister, just because he had some interaction with, at that time, with Soviets, he was warned and then he was assassinated. And not only that, recently, a few years back, the person who assassinated Liaquat Ali Khan Akbar, the guy who was a killer, his family was protected in Pakistan with guards, and also the money the family was receiving was from this country. And then they went to America, and the wife of the killer, so they were protected. They knew everything. Recently, some declassified documents said a lot about that. Then further on, the great leader, as you said, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, later on, not only his judicial killing, also if you look into Kissinger's interview some years back in Atlantic about breakup of Pakistan, he was informed by another dictator, Yahya Khan, that yes, we'll break up this country. And he told him in November, and the breakup happened in December. The conspiracy always was from, in many ways, after British interference, then went to American interference. Then you see all the dictators, they've been given medals in different form or others from America, and they were supported. I tell you, I've been involved in many, many ways, and your wonderful friend, also you've been honored by Pakistan for your services, great service, always been respected. We always respect you. We are not, I'm not your employer, I'm a follower of you. Your stance was always respected. And your observation about Pakistan and your involvement with Pakistani issues, we all know, and you know well how Benazir was assassinated. It was a British-American conspiracy. So if even whatever the letter was shown by Imran Khan, that there was a conspiracy, if we even ignored that thing, but I tell you, if you look back from day one, from Jinnah, Ayub Khan, Iskandar Mirza, or Yahya Khan, or Bhutto killing, or Benazir killing, and any other regime which came in, you'll find always bloody hands of America. Everything is in Pakistan manipulated or corrupted, even Nawaz Sharif corruption, even Musharraf corruption, many other stories I've broke out. In those, I always found some link, somehow the Americans were involved. So the regime change, always we found why CIA is involved. Even many of the presidents were involved in many, many ways, and they were controlled by them. So we are controlled, still controlled. Honorable Ken Livingstone, he was saying about the, when Pakistan colony was created, it was still the same colony. We were under control completely by British, but now America is holding everything in any way.
Fascinating historical perspective. Aqib Mahmood, comrade of mine, stood with me in London elections. You've stood twice, in fact, in London elections. You're an activist of Imran Khan's party. I presume that you think he can make a comeback. Am I right?
Absolutely. I think he's shown that the public support is definitely with him, overwhelmingly with him. And he's raised a lot of concerns for the powers that be inside Pakistan, because currently all of his major rallies are taking place in what is known as the recruitment grounds of the military. So these are all the areas in what used to be the Northwest Frontier Province, which is now the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Province, and central and northern Punjab, which is the homeland of where majority of the military officers are recruited from and majority of the military is recruited from. And the support over there for him is just unbelievable. Just to mention a point on the question that you raised, whether it was internal or external, it was both. The agitation against Imran Khan has been going on since the first year, and the powers that be, they weren't happy with the way he was running things, and they were always trying to control him like a puppet on a string. And eventually he wasn't controllable at all. And the visit to Russia was the last straw for the Americans, which gave the green signal to the establishment inside Pakistan, and everything you saw happened, just as you said, overnight. Members of his party were bought and paid for. The vote of no confidence happened as swiftly as a knife in the back, and then the courts opened up in the middle of the night to ensure the stamp of approval on this, and there was no constitutional comeback. So, as you said rightly, he's asking for a democratic solution, which is an election. Now, of course, the new government is stuck because of the political landscape that they've inherited from Imran Khan, and he's exposed this regime change. So they're stuck in a no man's land, because if they fulfill the agenda that they have been given, then they will suffer a political blowback and prove his theory. And if they don't fulfill the agenda that he's been given, that they will receive no external support, which is what Pakistan's economy requires right now.
Now, I think we all know that the army ultimately decides if there's going to be an election, if a prime minister is going to be overthrown. I mean, one of the reasons I opposed the coup against Imran Khan is that I had to oppose all the previous coups. So I would have been a complete hypocrite to support one coup, having opposed the others, and they've all been overthrown. Benazir, Nawaz Sharif, Musharraf were all overthrown on the eventual decision by the army. Imran Khan became the prime minister because the army favoured him. They favoured him perhaps against the others. He was the lesser of evils, but they strewn his path with flowers to become prime minister. Why did they fall out of love with him?
I'll have to take issue with that. in my humble opinion, I think he was not made prime minister with the help of the army. If anything, they weakened him because they involved all sorts of ex-People's Party members of the National Assembly who were basically wiped out in the Punjab. They convinced them to join his party, and they were the ones who then betrayed him now, number one. Number two,
I know one of them only too well.
Yeah.
Go on.
And then it seemed at the time, with Nawaz Sharif being convicted and going to prison, it seemed at the time that Imran Khan was going to get a majority, a clear majority. But it so happened that he did not get a clear majority, and he had to rely on these allies, which is, as I said, that they were trying to control him through these allies who then abandoned him in the vote of no confidence that happened and removed him from power.
I accept that. I accept that correction.
What fell out, the fallout that actually happened was Imran Khan was just too independent for the military to control. They prefer people like Shahbaz Sharif, they prefer people like Nawaz Sharif, and they prefer people like Asif Zardari because they can leave them to do whatever they want to do in terms of economic corruption or whatever, and the military can get on with the business of running the state. And Imran Khan was perhaps too hands-on for that. And also, no matter what threats they gave him, he was not backing off because he himself was not corrupt in that sense. There were people around him who were definitely corrupt, and that's the baggage that he's carrying of a political class that he's inherited. I mean, he can't just open his arms and ask for angels to ascend from the heavens above. He has to work with what he's got inside Pakistan. And all of these people are tainted with corruption of one sort or another. Some of them, are trying to do better than what they were before. And, it's up to the public to decide.
Yeah, well, I mean, he is not personally corrupt, and I know him very well. And he is not personally afraid of dying either. He doesn't believe that this world that we're in is the last world. So that is a problem for anyone trying to control you. Let's go to Fatima Ayub in Lahore in Pakistan. She's a journalist and a lawyer, but a strategic security analyst with the speciality of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Fatima, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George. Thank you for having me.
How do you analyze the removal of a popular prime minister in that way? What do you think is the reason for the removal of Imran Khan?
Well, when you think about Pakistan's political history, since 1947, since Pakistan came into being, about 29 prime ministers have come into play, and none of them have yet been able to complete their 5-year term. I think that says a lot about the political context in which Pakistan has been rooted in. As far as the Imran Khan regime goes, I don't think that anyone, even as far back as a month prior to his removal, could have ever expected something like this to take place. And that is because you could see Imran Khan, he visited the Beijing Olympics. He, on the very day that Russia announced the invasion of Ukraine, it was Imran Khan who was in the office with Putin, meeting him to essentially bargain for reduced oil prices. And things were going quite well in terms of foreign policy when it came to Pakistan. Khan was also a populist leader. And although reports have claimed that Imran Khan was aware of this no confidence motion being orchestrated by the opposition since July of last year, I don't think he even gave anyone a hint of what was to come. So it was quite a shock to the Pakistani population when this did take place in March.
How do you assess this change? Is it
Shahbaz Sharif, and actually the PMLN has historically enjoyed a very good relationship with India. And when I say that, I also mean personal relationship with Modi. I mean, he was there at many of Sharif's wedding festivities in Lahore. As far as the oath-taking ceremony of Shahbaz Sharif was concerned, India was actually one of the first countries to congratulate Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif on regaining a seat, as Pakistan's premier. And I think that goes a long way to show us how Pakistan-India relations will perhaps move for the better, at least in terms of optics. But we can't really say for sure unless we have more things to base this assumption on. When it comes to the US, I mean, it is quite evident when you look at the cable that was communicated to the Pakistani, to the former Prime Minister Imran Khan via the US, via the Pakistani ambassador to the US, Amjad Majid Khan, that the US stated that Pakistan would be in hot waters if Prime Minister Imran Khan was not ousted. So now that he has been ousted with the no confidence motion, there is a tacit assumption that obviously better relations with the US will resume under Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's tutelage. And that also ties up with the fact that Pakistan will now be going back to the IMF, given that economic collapse is quite sadly imminent in Pakistan. And obviously, as times have always shown us, as history has always shown, you need the US on your side when you need to go to the IMF for more money. Shehbaz Sharif is most likely to be visiting the US and be visiting the IMF headquarters in the next coming months. Pakistan-China relations will just continue as they have previously, because I don't think they've ever been based very intelligently so on the change of any political seats, really. So it should be pretty much a resumption of status quo in that arena. But I believe US and India is where we'll see the most amount of changes.
Because of these economic problems, do you see Pakistan tilting further in the direction of Riyadh, of Saudi Arabia?
So under Imran Khan, Pakistan moved towards having quite an equitable, mutual relationship with both Saudi Arabia, with Iran, with the US, with China. Now that Pakistan finds itself in hot waters yet again, since 2018, it is quite very much expected that Shehbaz Sharif will have to look towards Saudi Arabia and towards the Middle East, the UAE historically as well, for increased aid, and especially to help bail us out of the IMF loans that Pakistan is quite heavily situated in. So yes, that is very much a possibility.
Given what you've said, do you think the chance of a general election is over for now? Or are you expecting this mass mobilization to prevail with elections soon?
Yeah, so George, given the huge popularity and the huge turnouts of crowds for Prime Minister Imran Khan as he's held these protests all over Pakistan, given that and his consistent pressure on the current government of Shehbaz Sharif to bring the elections about, we're expecting that there should be a move swiftly towards general elections this very year. The Pakistan Election Commission has also announced that they'd be able to hold elections in October 2022.
If there is no general election soon, then what happens next? Are we expecting these protests perhaps to turn violent?
George, one of the more unfortunate things that have been happening in Pakistan is the mass media blackout under the current Shehbaz Sharif regime, and the mass blackout of the coverage of Prime Minister Imran Khan's various protests across Pakistan. There have been mass, very popular crowds have been gathering, like hundreds and thousands of people have been gathering, even in fringe cities like Jhelum and Attock. As well as other cities like Islamabad, Karachi, and Lahore, where Prime Minister Imran Khan has held jalsas or protests of hundreds and thousands of people. So it's a fair thing to observe and to say that people are definitely in favor of a general election to be held as soon as possible. I think part of that is also fueled by the fact that Pakistan is facing an extreme economic crisis. This was obviously also observed as part of Prime Minister Imran Khan's own government in the last year or so, where he had felt the need to go to the IMF. There was mass inflation. The Pakistani rupee has been faring really badly against the dollar. It is at its lowest that it has ever been against the dollar, which is rupees 193. And generally, there's been an increase in utility prices all over the country. So people are really, really feeling the heat of this political upheaval in Pakistan. And there are massive calls for the elections to be held as soon as possible. Yes.
Fascinating stuff. More after the break. Stay tuned. You're watching كلمة حرة with me, George Galloway, on Al-Mayadeen television, coming from London, talking about Pakistan, which with 220 million Muslims is a very important part of the Muslim world. Ken Livingstone, you were the mayor of London. What is it about London that attracts these kleptocrats from what we call third world or developing countries? Pakistan is now being run from Mayfair. The ousted Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, wanted on serious corruption charges, was allowed to come to London because his platelets were low. Now he's in one of many sumptuous Mayfair properties, effectively running a country of 220 million people. And Pakistan's not the only country where that happens. What is it that first attracts them to coming to live in London?
Well, I think the situation, you look back over the last 40 years under our Prime Ministers Thatcher and Tony Blair and now, of course, Boris Johnson, we decriminalised all the dodgy financial dealings that people could do. And so now, I mean, we've got all this sort of, vast donations being made to the Tory party and then contracts awarded to the company that's doing all that. I mean, corruption has become legal. I mean, you wouldn't have got away with that in the 1950s. People would have been sent to prison. And I think this is the tragedy, that all over the world, things are getting worse. And a small, rich elite are paying virtually no tax. I mean, you actually look at the billionaires here in America pay virtually no tax at all. It's all money laundered through the Caribbean. Ordinary people are facing really painful tax increases, and they can't even afford to buy meals every day anymore. It's appalling. And I just can't believe, because I think of the world I grew up in, we were optimistic. Everything always got better. Now, I fear for my children and what the world's going to be like in 20 years for them.
Shahid, the young lady from Lahore, speaking very powerfully, I must say, talked about media blackout, but the Pakistanis are very clever people. First of all, the millions that were at the rallies know that they were at them, and they know there were millions of others also at them. So not being able to be reported in Pakistani newspapers isn't much of a defense against that. But also social media is such that everyone in Pakistan knows that Imran Khan's on the march, don't they?
Of course. I think people, those who think that they can black out in this time period, they are fools. The thing is, people have got access. I remember I was doing a study, I was in Pakistan for a council of newspaper editors, and there I came across with this, the way mobile phone and the telecommunication was developing, everyone has got, they don't have food to eat, but they have got a mobile, and everybody follows that, and they have their own choices. And I think this change, this digital new world order kind of thing in Pakistan from China and other so many international companies involved, that gave them option to look through other means where they believe that there is some truth. And there also, this medium was also controlled by them. The regime changes, the real culprit. I tell you the fact, I have investigated so many big people about Pakistan, and I feel that they are not only just lesser evil, I feel that in comparison to the real culprits, they're just, even I know for truth, some 1,200 billion corruption money was laundered over here, Nawaz Sharif and all that. I have got the proofs as well, and the documentary you must have seen on BBC. The thing is, even they seems like an ant in comparison to a camel. The camel is the one, those who are playing behind, those who are killing Prime Minister, those who are letting them be in exile, like Benazir. How many years she was in exile? Definitely. How much she suffered? How much her family suffered? Similarly, many others. Even all of these, the worst of the worst, like Altaf Hussain, like even now Nawaz Sharif, all those, I feel like they are the lesser of the lesser evil. The real culprit, those who are multi-billionaires, they are behind that. And in this regime change, I tell you, I'm not in support of Imran. I've got so many things to talk about that. But that's not the point. You took the right point must have to condemn those who are the real problem maker in Pakistan. And they are the Americans mainly, or the foreigners, those who are intervening in Pakistan, those who are using the issue with India and also Afghanistan. And they are the ones, those who are mainly behind this corruption. They are the ones, those who create these political puppets. In Karachi only, during 85 till 2013, when I was in Karachi, I read a report, I spoke to, the famous philanthropist, Eidi, Maulana Eidi. One of his administrators told me when he was tying a note on a dead body, he wrote 278,873. I said, what is this number? He said, this is the number, last number today. Since 85, I've buried in Karachi as unknown death. And can you imagine, in Karachi, if I calculate all the 500,000 people were killed for no reason. Forget about corruption. Corruption is nothing for me. Almost 40% of them were the youths, not more than 16 to 22. All these kind of things. Then you look into those jihadis and all those. They were created, even in the elections, just last election, so many people, so many political leaders were killed in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So many other people were killed. So they control. And in this whole chain, removing Imran Khan, the worst of the worst thing happened to Pakistan is people now know only that political people are corrupt. They don't know who the real corrupt are. I know for a fact, if you look into Panama paper or any other papers, you'll find only 5% are known as political people, remaining are all linked somehow with the families or the links with the generals. Even in Nawaz Sharif's case, the major outcome was there was drug money involved, and behind that, all generals, those who use Afghan funds to launder money outside, they bought properties. Their name came up, nothing happened. We can debate, okay, he's corrupt, that is corrupt, all of this is corrupt, but who is controlling them? Who is making them as a puppet? So they are now completely hidden. The regime changer or the killer is only one section, which is known as establishment, which is in uniform. And they are the one, they are the multi-billionaire business people. They are where the funds are going, all the IMF funds, all the loans, everything came in the name of Afghan jihad and all. Where it has gone, not to the public. We found only, I remember 95, 97, 98, the European Union drug report, more than 400 generals were involved in drug. And they are the billionaires, their sons are billionaires. Those who were controlling this politics in different form, whether in People's Party, whether in Nawaz Sharif, whether even in PTI now. So they are the real one, we have to put the spotlight on them. And you took the right step. The real culprit is America, and with them, the assisting fact is these regime changes.
Aqib, what about the other point that Fatima made? And let me, in a way, turn it around. If this great democratic movement demanding only one thing, elections, now, if that fails, what happens then?
Well, it'll be the road to anarchy, because the doors of anarchy have already been opened by the establishment itself. So, as I mentioned earlier, that the establishment was trying to get rid of Imran Khan or trying to control him from day one. This recent vote of no confidence, which removed him, was the result of the third long march to Islamabad by the then opposition, which is now the government. The first one was designed to make one of the chief of army staff, no less, his relatives, business partners, make him the chief minister of the Punjab province, which is the largest and most populous, the most populous province. And he's the business partner of a residential empire, basically. And so, as Shahid mentioned, the corruption goes right the way to the very top. You know, these top elite generals are involved in own most of the land and are busy making, housing societies and billions of rupees off that. So the first one was done to do that. And when Imran Khan agreed that, okay, I will change my chief minister and make this person chief minister who you've nominated, that chief minister, the chief minister who was supposed to be chosen, he got arrested by the National Accountability Bureau overnight, so he couldn't make it. So then the second long march happened a year later, and as a result of that, Nawaz Sharif was let out of prison and sent to the United Kingdom for 50 rupees. 50 rupees is all it took. Imran Khan said that I'll let him go if his platelets are down to go to England and to go to London and to get medical treatment. But he has to deposit as bail all of the money that he's been fined and all of the money that, the value of the assets that have to be recovered. He has to put that down as bail so that we have a guarantee that he's going to come back. And if he doesn't come back, at least we'll have something to show for it. And the court said no. He just needs to write it down on a 50 rupees stamp paper and he can go. And that's what he did. And he left and he said, I'm going away for 8 weeks, and he didn't come back 3 years now. The third long march that happened was stopped because of COVID. And then now the fourth one is what resulted in the regime change. So the corruption goes right to the very top. And if you can let convicted criminals just leave the country, and now they're running the country from here, as you said, from Park Lane and from Mayfair, you're literally opening the doors to anarchy. Why should anyone believe in the rule of law? Why should anyone accept the judgment of any court when you can just say, well, if I have enough power and if I have enough influence, I can just leave. I can just come out of prison. I can just, it's a question of might is right. So if you don't do what's right morally in this situation, which is to hold an election and to get rid of this taint of an important, if these people are so popular with the public, they should be willing to hold an election and say, look, Imran Khan ruined the country and we're going to come and save it, and the public will support them. But because they don't have the moral standing to do so, they're refusing these elections, and that's what's going to happen if we refuse these elections, that we're going to have a moral outrage and an anarchic situation.
In a country of 220 million
Can I,
people
a nuclear-armed country.
with nuclear weapons. Let me go to...
Before you go ahead, can I make a point? I came to know from some right quarters, they are here in London not to deal about the government, it's about the election. And some of them, they are organizing very soon, maybe in a month.
Elections that they will rig?
Well, the controllers, those who are always known as culprits of rigging or stealing the results or public mandate, they are still in power. So, and all those who are in front of them, they are submissive. So they will submit, but the thing is, election will happen because they have to, for the face saving, to save those who are the regime change.
The tidal wave of people on the street is so much that they can't resist. I want to hear from Asim Khan, who is a former president of Imran Khan's party, the PTI, in the UK. He's a technologist by profession, as well as a poet. Asim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Why was the US so keen on removing Prime Minister Imran Khan?
I think there has always been, historically speaking, attempts by US in various regions, places in Latin America during the Cold War era as well. The forms of interventions were different. Sometimes it's direct and sometimes indirect. And if you come back to Pakistan and the region Pakistan is in Southeast Asia, and there's a lot of things that are happening. I mean, in terms of the foreign policy, in terms of the shift, you look at China, you look at China-Russia relationship, Russia there, then obviously the Middle Eastern countries. So there is a lot of, I think, emphasis as well that US feels after departure from Afghanistan that for it to have any semblance of any role in that region, I think they really need to sort of kind of go after Pakistan as well. Now, with that sort of view, I think that the whole thing has sort of came around that Pakistan is trying to first to have an independent foreign policy, secondly to have a great and dynamic working relationship with China and Russia. Pakistan has always emphasized, Prime Minister Khan at that time was emphasizing that I think the time has come, instead of being part of or unipolar world and all have our eggs with the US. We need to diversify our foreign policy as well, and it makes it easier for the rest of the world as well, because then in that case we do not have that perception of Pakistan being seen in the US camp. So with this balanced policy, as the others do, we are trying to do the same as well. So I think with these kind of inclinations and historical background, the US has had pretty extensive experience of removing governments, interference, CIA covert operations, and all sorts of forms and shapes as well. So that's the view.
How do you assess this change? Is it an internal coup d'etat or an external regime change operation?
I think it's, I mean, for these things to happen, basically, I mean, we got to understand that we are in 21st century. We are in a global village. We have technology at a very fast pace. So the ideas and of things like that is always kind of I would say, a working partnership in that sense, that people do obviously have those tendencies. I mean, it's not just like that, the hardcore traditional, the way it used to be in the past. So I think there has been, I mean, since Nawaz Sharif is sitting here, and that kind of is giving a huge inclination to that viewpoint, that he must have been talking to all sorts of people as well, people from the US and other sort of countries as well, and then his party, and then the way the coalition actually got all together, covered up the vote of no confidence. So I think it was both external and internal.
You've just come back from Pakistan and you'll be returning soon. How do people there see what has happened? What do they think is going to happen next?
I think it's kind of the first time the people of Pakistan are actually realizing that actually the politics of Pakistan has to change, not just in view of what's happened in the last few 2 months with Prime Minister Khan. I think they're finally realizing that the governments they bring in, the governments that want to do things on their behalf, those governments then don't. All those things, all the secrecy that is kept between them and the state. So people are actually getting slightly frustrated. They're asking questions, and why not? At the same time, they want this sort of stability where there is no, I mean, we do not want violence, or we do not want to follow the model which was followed up in Tunisia or Egypt or all the other sort of the spring revolutions. I mean, we want to have an economic stability and a revolution in that. But people are asking questions. I mean, you're going to be surprised that I belong from the rural belt, and in the rural belt, there are a lot of people who are asking questions. People of all ages. It's not just the youth. So they are asking questions. So basically, the kind of awareness has set in pretty deep that people want change, where the institutions are actually respect each other, working with each other, and for the delivery and the benefit of the people of Pakistan, not for their own good and not for their own benefit.
The new Prime Minister of Pakistan and his son are both out on bail. I'm sorry, I have to laugh. Both out on bail, charged with very serious criminal offences. How can that happen? How can you appoint someone as Prime Minister who's out on bail?
I think it works in Pakistan because our legal systems are take huge amount of time and effort. Morally speaking, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be at all. I mean, if any politician or any party that has any even a whisper of a sort of an accusation on them, they should not be. But this is Pakistan, where all sorts of things have taken place before as well. And this is the Pakistan we want to get away from and have proper concept of transparency and accountability. So in relation to Shehbaz Sharif and his son in Punjab, I think the courts have still not, the cases are going on.
Finally, as a supporter of Imran Khan, what do you want to achieve? An election soon, is that it?
I think the call of the party is actually that there needs to be a fresh mandate where people can exercise their will. Now, obviously, there are lots of issues as well that these guys obviously want to, as per my view, that they would want to delay the elections into to the next year. I don't think they would want to have the elections this year because they want to carry some the changes which we had brought in for the election rules. I think they want to reverse it. At the same time, they want to gather some stability because there's a lot of heat at the moment against them. So if they actually open up the elections now, in 3 months' time, they know that Khan will actually sway with 2/3 majority. So they want to delay that. But at the same time, they want to try to have some form of stability. I mean, with IMF negotiations and so on and so forth. At the same time, the law and order situation has to be maintained as well, because we do not want an outright violence and things like that. So it's pretty delicate, I would say. And there has to be some sanity to be prevailed as well.
Well, there we have it. The government of Pakistan reads like the front page of the Police Gazette. Something like 60% of the members of Pakistan's federal cabinet are wanted criminals. They are people who are out on bail, oh, so interminable bail, for money laundering and crimes of economic corruption of an Everestian magnitude. No country in the world has ever had a government where the majority of the members were wanted for serious crimes. And yet they live and have lived lives of luxury here in London, rolling around in their stolen property. And as Ken Livingstone, the former mayor of London, has pointed out, all with the absolute equanimity and collaboration by the British government, which is forever lecturing others on good governance and on the rule of law and the rules-based order. The truth is, the Pakistani power elite now stands naked. And the big question is, and this is a question for those of us who believe in people's power, can the mass movement of millions of people on the street prevail over a powerful military, filthy rich, and backed by the United States of America? Perhaps the last time that succeeded was in the Iranian Revolution, in the 1979 revolution. If it can be replicated in a Pakistan, country so populous, of such strategic importance, and as I said earlier, armed with nuclear weapons, if that popular power can prevail, then this will change everything, and not just in the South Asian region. It's for that reason I nail my colours firmly to the mast of Imran Khan, at least as far as this goes. I want an election in Pakistan to elect a government of the Pakistani people's choosing. What happens after that is only a matter for them and not for anybody else. And I speak as someone who holds the two highest civil awards in Pakistan, given to me on the first occasion for my work in the movement for the restoration of democracy in Pakistan. I was in favor of the restoration of democracy in the 1970s and 80s. I sure am still in favor of it. I've been George Galloway. This has been Kalima Hora. Thank you for watching.